welcome back to the Growing Revolution. I'm Eric Olson with Smart Pot Fabric Planters, and this week our guest is AC Moon, who has been involved in the cannabis cultivation trade for over 2 decades, and we wanted to get her on to talk about her experiences and how she is helping growers to grow better cannabis. So, AC, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me on. I'm really honored to be
Yeah,
here.
thank you so much. So, I guess jumping right in, can you talk about growing up and when you first started cultivating cannabis?
Well, I grew up in Northern California, where, as a lot of people know, is really deep intrinsic culture of already being in the cannabis culture. And so I had back to earther homesteader community, and my mom was a doomsday prepper. So we were always taught to farm and live off the land. And so when it came to getting into high school and me realizing the commerce behind it, I got into hustling probably at way too young of an age, probably 13 or 14, because all the hippies really needed outlets essentially. And so we were trained definitely to come out of the woods and kind of, bring products out. And so doing farmers markets and anything we could growing up. And yeah, it was a long time. So eventually just started advocating in 1999 through just living on the streets, basically hustling and bouncing from one place to another, getting myself through school, and found San Francisco in the advocacy reign. And I had grown up with my mom with cancer and my dad as being a vet, and there was just a community of super toxic stuff and things going on. But the cannabis community always represented positive, and we could grow our wares, and it just felt safer. So I stayed there and went to school for environmental horticulture and started my first cannabis business in 2001, which was Harvest Moon Munchie Company, and
Yeah,
making
so
edibles for cannabis patients.
that was a lot earlier than most cannabis brands coming out. Most brands have been somewhat recent. So what was that product, and how is it different than edibles back then, and how is the business different today in general?
Well, back then, everybody was working with cannabis butter that was made with, hard biomass materials or something like that. So I was already using a Moroccan method. I had met some very cool Moroccan people that owned a dispensary down the way on Mission Boulevard. And when I started my first dispensary, they showed me all these traditional methods and how to use silks and fabrics and stuff. This was way before bubble bags and everything like that. We had to make it all ourselves. And I still use those fabrics today, the very same ones that I brought over. So it's these fine silks. And so being able to concentrate the material and put that into edibles made it so that I could provide a much higher dosage than a lot of people were making these giant brownies or here, take this. And so that was kind of what was changing things at the time, and right at the point where our whole community kind of changed to having concentrates as edibles and stuff. So that was always cool to be a part of. But there were so many recipes. I think I was well known for my bonbons, and still am well known for my bonbons, which are similar to Reese's peanut butter cups, except for they're made with molasses and organic materials and dipped in chocolate. So I won my first award, I think, in 2003 at the Doja Cup in Los Angeles, and that's when I started really distributing in Southern California and taking it as far as I could. And so that was a really cool platform to work with. At the time was groundbreaking. Now we have innovations. At the Emerald Cup doing edibles judging, we have hundreds and hundreds of entries. So being able to compare what I experienced at that point to now is just vast worlds away. So it's amazing to see that innovation and be part of it.
Yeah, edibles have come a long, long way. I just remember back to my younger days, making brownies with, leftover stems and, kind of swag weed. And it tastes like you're eating the weed. And, doing edibles with concentrates where the chlorophyll, is totally taken out is such a more
Yes.
enjoyable experience, and, kind of opens up the healing power of cannabis to people who, otherwise might be turned off by that flavor and taste. So awesome that you were kind of leading the way on
Absolutely.
that.
And now we have the products that you can use the roughage, but we're using it more in a spiced way. So you'd be using it like an herb on your shelf, like rosemary, because it does add like a spice to it in like culinary practices. So you can add it back in as like an alternative taste, but you don't have to get stuck with that huge fiber fill that is just, yeah, you don't want to sauce through your edibles, that's for sure.
Exactly. So, AC, you've got a really solid resume for horticulture. Why have you leaned towards organic cultivation versus salts? Or do I have you wrong? Are you an advocate for both? Can growers use both?
No, I'm definitely not an advocate for salts at all due to the antibiotics that are put into large ag for them to harvest urea and other aspects. The entire cycle of it is really, really bad for the environment. I'm definitely an advocate of regenerative farming, home practices that create like terroir that is enhancing our climate instead of decreasing the value of the microbes. And so it's really, I think, important all over the world that I've traveled working in different like soil cultivation sites. It's one of the most important factors to put in all of the KNF methods, all the Jadon methods, like all the organic composting methods, worm bed methods, kelp and sea waste. And, I mean, there's so many different methods, and just combine them all as much as you can, making sure that we're actually giving back to the earth by growing instead of just completely deleting the planet of all the stuff that's going to save us in the end.
Yeah, we're running out of phosphorus. Mined phosphorus is supposed to be, extinct within 100 years. And I'm a big advocate of, feeding the soil, which then feeds the plant. So I think we're on the same page here. Now,
and many elements from all over the world, I think, including sulfur, are being overmined and really poor practices behind them. So for us to create things, it's hard. For us to help the environment create it itself, I think, is what the blessing is, for sure.
Yeah, I think working with Mother Nature has much better long-term benefits for us than going against it, for sure.
Oh, that's for sure.
So getting into your other business here, what is the CropTop Greenhouse? How did you come up with it? And, what's it for?
So I started cultivating large on my properties probably right around, 2000, right at the turn of the century. And as I was getting my degrees in horticulture, I found smart pots, and I was working in gardens, trimming and doing everything else for like the elder growers that are now in their 60s and 70s. And seeing what they were doing, I was able to look at products that I was seeing, in the lab and around, which are like a fabric pot type aerative bed. And I was like, oh, this is going to be so cool. So we started doing depths. And I think in 2001, I started doing all these light deprivation projects with smart pots and just using that whole platform. And I got my first 200 gallons like given to me by this older grower that didn't need them anymore, that was building solid wood permanent raised beds. It was like, you want me to use these? And I was like, dude, of course I do, because working in so remote places, like I can't build raised beds everywhere, and it's not always convenient or good for gophers or different aspects to have it subducted. So I was like, dude, smart pots. And so I was sitting there year after year watching them like get smashed, and NorCal weather was just crazy. And I was like using umbrellas from the porch and like anything I could, tarps, like tops of tents. And I just wanted to protect my ganja because I wanted to make sure it was the best it could be to go to the dispensaries for the patients, and eventually getting greenhouses and all that. But for the ones that are outside of the greenhouse, I had these big patios, and I was like, I just want to make that a greenhouse. Like, that's just going to go over these pots and these beds and where I want it to be, instead of me having to drag these plants in and out of the greenhouse every day. I'm just going to make the greenhouse where it is. So I made the entire umbrella situation into 9.4 polywoven plastics that we use in traditional greenhouses, and it became an instant pop-up portable greenhouse. And so I filed my patent and was granted my first federal patent, as well as 21 micro patents. Has a stainless steel pole with a telescoping pole that will allow you to have the bubble right over your grow pot or your bed. And that protects it, of course, in a biodome way. It has ventilation at the top that has meshing, so you could use it for pest management. And then the telescoping pole allows it to grow with your plant all the way up to 9 feet tall. And also I've put them on top of cages many times, as well as many clients have, where they have 200-gallon, 300-gallon grow pots, and they have their caging set up to 12 feet, and we just set those crop tops right on top of it, and the parabolic shape allows for the runoff to protect those buds, but still be using the sunlight. And in indoor and greenhouse, I found it became really good to have like a quarantine space for fogging and actually taking the time to quarantine, isolate house area problems with pests and manage those so that it didn't proliferate around your space, as well as an instant pop-up quarantine for, germination, breeding, to help do like a little bit of science and research. So it became really eclectic, and I found a lot more uses than I even started with. And so that's been my passion project, was getting into invention, and now I love product innovations. So that's my jam.
That's really cool. It's a really cool concept, and we'll add in some pictures and video or whatever on the back end so people can see what these look like who are watching the podcast.
Thank you.
So, how long have you been working as a consultant, and what does that all entail? And where are your clients located? You said you were just getting back from the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Absolutely. I founded in 2018. I realized that my 24 years of experience was like, I'm spinning my wheels, because California industry and many other industries here are spinning their wheels, and that there's so many people that were on these groundbreaking moments that I loved, of where the first medical marijuana movements are just going on. Their culture is just integrating cannabis. And so I founded Indica Innovations International, where I go all over the world and try to help people innovate everything from writing SOPs to actually doing business structure, risk management, cultivation, propagation, mothering, learning how to tempered cultivations. I've had the goose strain going for over 20 years. So knowing one genetic and keeping that landrace, skill alive, and then doing edibles. And most recently, I just got back yesterday from St. Thomas, where we're setting up the first legal dispensary system and hoping to educate the people with Oaksterdam University. So I'm really blessed to get a chance to educate the equity community, and met up with the Rastafari Nation to see how they wanted to implement into taking their sacrament into commodities. And so just finding ways to really consciously cultivate and integrate cannabis back into these different societies that have been proliferated due to prohibition.
Yeah, I just always find it so crazy, like, the Caribbean islands, Jamaica, like for so long, like cannabis, has just been entrenched in those cultures, but it was illegal. So, I mean, same as the USA, but almost more so there.
Very much so.
It's just crazy. And it's awesome to see that the walls are coming down.
Absolutely. And the persecution of the Rasta Empire goes so much deeper, because we can listen to the sound of Bob Marley or just a couple of reggae tunes, and we know that cannabis is safe in those energies. Like, we associate it in every way as cannabis being a part of the Rasta vibration. So I think in that being a world notation, worldwide, that's true, that reggae is the atonement for that. So I think definitely them being held in the highest regard is having to liberate their equity. And they're not interested in money, they're interested in surviving and creating a higher vibration. So I'm hoping to be able to integrate that all with good business practices on the dispensary, retail, and international shipping and exporting.
Yeah, you can have the best of intentions in the world, but if you don't have like a solid business plan, you're not going to last too long. So that's good that you're there to help people, that you're kind of their training wheels as they get going.
Yeah, it's been amazing. It's actually the fourth country that I actually got to be there the day of legalization and be involved in the cannabis industry the day of legalization. My last large project last year was in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and working in that culture as well was it's just a blessing. All over the Caribbean, all over Asia, and in general, that is a real pushing space, I think, for the cannabis culture, just because the climate and environment is perfect for cultivation. And so that's a real, as well as mushrooms. I cannot deny that. I've seen many licenses now as they proliferate also towards the, shall we say, exploitation of mycology as well.
Yeah, that's taken off like a rocket too. It should be interesting to see where that industry ends up. Are you selective of who you're taking on as a client, or is it pretty much just kind of like hit me up and I'll help you?
No, I'm very selective in the way that I look at the background. I do a lot of due diligence on anybody that I take part in. I mean, it takes me years sometimes for me to want to, go out, because I do travel to international nations by myself at times with just the backing of like Oaksterdam University or some other like constituents and colleagues that I work with as consultants as well. And so, yeah, I do a lot of, and the large industry, I'm very, picky. I'm not going to say any names, but I've definitely turned down some jobs that I felt were not good for the culture that they were targeting, and that it's very important for me to make sure that those cultures understand the bad business practices I've seen from some of the larger companies in the continental United States, to make sure that they have an opportunity to educate themselves and not have that same mistake made in their native area.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's super important, because it's really hard when we don't have enough education in the world. There's too much policing of true education and too much bullshit media, like regurgitated information.
Yeah.
So we need to go back to grassroots on that.
Certainly. So the cannabis industry, varies from state to state, but in general, it's seen what a lot of people consider a downturn over the last year. How have your clients been dealing with that?
That is so hard to answer, in the way that every area is so endemic and so far from each other. If I speak to a client in New Jersey, they're very much on the page of where it's still a new, budding, thriving economy, as well as Virgin Islands or, say, England or Ireland, where they're like, even hemp is just so new to them and such a fresh commodity to become part of their society. I don't think it's really easy to answer that one, just because there's such a digressive. But if I speak to someone in California, it's very easy for me to say, listen, your ISO has got to be put in place. Like, you have to bend your CGMP needs to go on. Like, you have to go to such a higher degree in order to not be part of the acquisitions and monopolizations that will be gained from the failure of a lot of different aspects of overtaxation. And so with that being in place, it's just so endemic to where the places are. Internationally, everybody's excited because this is so new. But in California, everybody's like, bleep! So it's very polar opposite. Cannabis industry is very torn right now, I think. And it's interesting to see how the ball fields and the playing fields will even out, so that we can all, speak the same language, essentially.
Yeah, totally. I guess being a cannabis consumer and, on the production side of things, like, yes, everyone wants free weed, but at the same time, like, it takes a lot of time, effort, knowledge, technique that goes into cultivating high quality cannabis, especially. So there's got to be a healthy middle ground where, farmers are, able to make a living. People are able to get decent product, and hopefully the government doesn't take more than their fair slice.
Yeah, that's hard to believe that will happen. But I just try to tell everybody that cannabis is not a gateway drug. It's a gateway to the garden. So we have this same ability to proliferate our talents of cultivation through our food. And having a little bit of veggie garden, and not to plug smart pots again, but that's a really easy way to do it on a deck, like anywhere, like just an instant garden where you can have your food and then have a couple of cannabis plants in legal places. And that provides you, like, this is, your own, and that learning experience, like, every time you do it will just get better and better. And it just is like so much love when you grow your own stuff.
Yep.
Like, so much love. No matter who I work with, I always advocate that people still in their own home have one or two cannabis or hemp plants, just to enjoy the experience and energy of having, food of any form or medicine around you, even though I'm not supposed to say it's medicine.
Yeah. Well, it is medicine, for your body and mind. And everyone should grow their own medicine, grow their own food. Less money going through the supermarkets, lowering your carbon footprint, all that good stuff. So, all right. So, are there any aspects of pre-legalization cannabis that you miss from like 10, 20 years ago or longer, and why?
Oh, wow, that's such a good question. I think that medical marijuana, as we called it at that point in time, it was about compassionate use, and it was about a focus on plant medicine and integrating it into lifestyle changes and being able to save people from cancer and different things, and this awe-inspiring science that we had just first coming to light to a lot of people. So I think that I definitely miss the community that really it's still there in a lot of ways, but it's forced to dissolve through competition. In a lot of ways, that need to compete has dissolved part of it. But there is still a core roots, elder grassroots that I love to death, and I hope that we can always preserve that compassionate use in between us, and just an understanding that even when you're talking about alcohol, we're talking about something that's made from a plant. All things, as much as I want to say that the alcoholism and the abuse and the toxicity of that, like, there's also people that can abuse cannabis and many other things, and opiates in general. Like, we have to level the playing field, that these are all plants that are being extorted in different ways. And to have compassion is remembering that it's about the plant, and like keeping like the freedom to use plant medicine and not be stuck with just the education forced down our throat through colonization or pharmaceutical media or whatever have you. So just freedom of thinking, I think, is what I miss the most, and what I hope that comes back in the future as we go through our next revolution of cannabis industry.
Yeah, I think, hopefully 100 years we'll look back in time and think like, wow, I can't believe that cannabis was illegal, but all this pharmaceutical crap that killed millions of people was legal. And
absolutely.
It boggles my mind, but we're moving in the right direction.
It's been worrisome because of the D10, or was it the THCO, is only made in a laboratory, and I'm seeing it already in circulation internationally. And so they're actually using already the catalyst of cannabis to synthesize a completely binomial product that isn't a cannabis product into a THC molecule, so that they can purposely put it back into the commodity sector. So I see it already being undermined in different ways, to just be aware. That's why a home grow and full spectrum entourage effect is what's going to help us all heal in lots of ways, I think.
Yeah.
That's just my personal opinion and not my medical advice.
Sure. So getting back into California's cannabis industry, they're struggling with oversupply, overtaxation. Lots of businesses are, getting out or just crashing. What do you think needs to be done to right the ship there?
And I believe that generally our commerce was always fueled by interstate purchasing. And that's one thing that has been hard for a lot of the new nation to accept, is that because of our climate and our environment, a lot of our larger purchasers, I know firsthand, are, from other parts of the nation that didn't have such good climate or the ability to hide from judicial sectors to be able to create large enough grows to proliferate in public as a commodity. So that black market, we got to break the laws to make the laws, and we did. And so now we're seeing everybody trying to follow the laws, and the laws are written to be very endemic to different areas. Like, we have to work within California. Well, if you have a place that has all the meccas of cannabis in one place, who the fuck's buying weed? Excuse my language. But like, in general, we have to be realistic that, yeah, we have the trades and we really have great things like the Mendocino Farmers Guild, that where they're bringing craft farms out so we can go to a market style and actually buy from the farmer as a consumer. So it brings back more of that organic farmers market feel, and getting to know the farmer's story, and that it's farmed in a regenerative way, and that it's not all this salty nation stuff where like, hey dude, you're smoking pee, but whatever, like you're good with it. And so it's kind of, trying to educate the masses. This is such a pain in the butt. Sorry. I love it though. I love it with all my heart. Just there's such a different perspectives everywhere that we have to battle. It's like debate team every day in cannabis industry. Debate team.
Yeah. It's interesting. Some people have no ego at all in the cannabis industry, and some people have like all the ego in the world, and they think like they invented the cannabis plant. And,
seriously.
These genetics have been here, as long as the plant has, and we're just
and
selectively
that's probably
breeding.
Prior to humans.
Yeah, exactly. So, AC, this has been a really fun, informative interview. Where can people get in touch with you to, purchase your products or retain your services?
I'm at indicainnovations.com. You can also find me at ac@oaksterdamuniversity.com, and hoping to educate every way possible, and AC Moon all over social media and LinkedIn as well. So if you want to be more of a social, let's share something, I go towards IG, but if you want to get business, please see all my certifications on LinkedIn and connect with me there so that we can actually work together and support each other in the future.
Yeah. So, again, thank you, for being a longtime Smart Pot user and supporter.
Go Smart Pot!
And thank you for being a longtime cannabis advocate and supporter. It's kind of the people who've been doing it for 20, 30 years that have brought us to where we are today. So thanks for blazing the trail.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. I appreciate that support. And thanks for doing what it is you're doing, too. Everybody's pioneering in their own space.
Yeah, we're just trying to, document these stories from people who have, been longtime, in general, Smart Pot fans, but, people who are into Smart Pots are into growing all things. So, and you're one of them.
And we love Smart Pots in the Caribbean, too. I took a couple of down there, and it really works well because we have such high humidities, and the aeroponic value of them is excelled because of the Caribbean moisture. So yeah, hoping to take them down to Virgin Islands too and see how the Rasta farmers like being able to move things around, and that should be interesting.
Yeah, that would be nice to take a work trip down there. Love the Caribbean. So on that note, looking forward to following your adventures on Instagram going forward.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Eric. Really nice meeting you. It's been fun.
Yeah, likewise.